means that the government has been sharing the burden of the input tax with business by subsidizing the difference of the general rate of 16% and the preferential rate of 8%. As a result, these practices and outcomes, the oil marketers have been in perpetual credit position and not paying VAT to the exchequer. This practice is discriminatory, and as business in other sectors of the economy bear the input tax by recovering the same from output VAT charged on the final consumer. Mr. Speaker, on reviewing the VAT rate on petroleum products to the standard rate, such business would at the onset recover the VAT credits that they have been carrying forward over the years, and government would end up correcting the VAT after some time. Mr. Speaker, if the anomaly is not corrected at the earliest stage, the buildup of credits will continue to increase, and should the government seek to charge VAT at the standard rate in the future, it would take years for the government to collect the much needed revenue from this sector, since the credits have to be exhausted before businesses start paying VAT. The continued practice by government to subsidize cost of fuel by levying a preferential rate of 8% distorts the market, yet the economy should be operating on the principles of demand and supply. Mr. Speaker, in this respect, I propose to the National Assembly to amend the VAT Act to remove the preferential rate on the petroleum products so that the products will be subject to the standard VAT at 16%. Mr. Speaker, the brew economy remains largely untapped despite its huge potential. This is particularly due to low investments in maritime activities over the years. In order to spur investment and attract international sea freight in this sector, I propose to the National Assembly to zero-rate inbound international sea freight offered by registered persons. The government will continue exploring ways of providing more incentives to promote investment in this sector. Mr. Speaker, currently, machinery used by pharmaceutical companies are exempt from VAT on importation. This is meant to complement government's effort to ensure that all Kenyans have access to affordable healthcare. However, we have received numerous petitions to extend the exemption to locally purchased machinery to further boost access to healthcare services. In this regard, I propose to the National Assembly to amend the VAT Act to extend the exemption to machinery and equipment purchased locally for use in the manufacture of pharmaceuticals. Mr. Speaker, in order to address the escalation of tax expenditures and foster prudent utilization of fiscal resources, I propose to the National Assembly to remove VAT exemptions in respect of taxable services supplied for construction of specialized hospitals, goods and services for the construction of tourism facilities, goods worth more than 2 billion purchased by manufacturers, as well as plant, machinery, and equipment used in the construction of plastic recycling plants. Mr. Speaker, currently, transfer of business as a going concern is subject to VAT at a standard rate. Taxpayers have raised concern that this discourages business reorganization and sale of businesses. In this regard, I propose to the National Assembly to amend the VAT Act to exempt transfer of business as a going concern. This is expected to encourage mergers and acquisition, hence boost growth of businesses as well as their efficiency. I now turn to the amendments to the Excise Duty Act 2015. Mr. Speaker, I will now highlight tax measures proposed under the Excise Duty Act. The Excise Duty Act provides for remittance of excise duty to the Kenya Revenue Authority, KRA, by the 20th day of the following month. In this era of technology, there's no justifiable reason for waiting for 20 days to report transactions to the KRA. In order to cure the delay, I propose to the National Assembly to amend the Act to provide for remittance of the excise duty on betting and gaming activities within 24 hours after closure of transactions by the betting and gaming companies. Mr. Speaker, betting and gaming prize competition and even lotteries are addictive in nature and have negative socio-economic consequences to the society. To discourage participation in these activities by Kenyans, and especially school-going children, I propose to the National Assembly to increase the rate of excise duty on betting, gaming, prize competition, and lotteries from the current 7.5% to 12.5%. Mr. Speaker, there has been an increase in the importation of fish into the country, which has negatively affected the local fish industry. To promote and protect local fish industry, which provides livelihood to many Kenyans, I propose to the National Assembly to introduce an excise duty on imported fish at Kenya shillings 100,000 per metric ton, or 10% of the excisable value, whichever is higher. Mr. Speaker, the government charges specific excise duty on juices per liter. However, there has been an increase in supply of juices in powder form, and based on the current tax regime on juices, the powdered juice is not subject to excise duty. And this creates an unfairness in taxation of juices. In order to cure this problem and to create a level playing field, I propose to the National Assembly to introduce excise duty on powdered juice at a rate of 25 shillings per kilogram. Mr. Speaker, currently, specific rates of excise duty are subject to annual adjustment for inflation. However, taxpayers are concerned with the frequent changes in specific rates of excise duty through annual adjustment, creating uncertainty in prices and distorting the markets. Therefore, in order to create certainty in excise duty tax regime, I propose to the National Assembly to repeal the provision for annual adjustment for inflation. Mr. Speaker, consumption of sugar has been associated with various ailments, such as diabetes, which has become common in many families. To discourage consumption of sugar, I propose to the National Assembly to introduce excise duty on imported sugar at a rate of 5 shillings per kilogram, including sugar, but this excludes the sugar imported or purchased locally by registered pharmaceutical manufacturers for use in the manufacture of pharmaceutical products. Mr. Speaker, consumption of alcohol, betting, gaming, and lottery and prize competition are extremely addictive and result in harmful repercussions in the society, especially the youth. In order to discourage these activities and consumption of alcoholic beverages, I propose to the National Assembly to introduce an excise duty rate of 15% of excisable value of fees charged on advertisement by all televisions, print media, billboards, and radio stations in promotion of alcohol, betting, gaming, lottery, and prize competition. Mr. Speaker, to promote inclusion and enhance access to internet data services, I propose to the National Assembly to reduce excise duty from 20% to 15% in respect of fees charged for telephones, internet, data services, and fees charged for money transfer services by banks, money transfer agencies, and other financial service providers. Mr. Speaker, in the same spirit, I propose to the National Assembly to reduce excise duty from 12% to 10% of the excisable value of the fees charged for money transfer services by cellular phone services providers or payment service providers licensed under the National Payment System. This will encourage retail transactions at a more affordable rate and promote economic activity at the MSME and individual levels. Mr. Speaker, locally produced cement has been facing stiff competition from imported cement. To protect from the unfair competition and promote this industry, I propose to the National Assembly to introduce an excise duty on imported cement at a rate of 10% of the excisable value, or Kenya shillings 1.50 cents per kilogram, whichever is higher. Mr. Speaker, there has been an increase in the importation of furniture, especially office furniture, which has negatively affected the local carpenters and artisans, considering that there is enough local capacity to make furniture. In order to protect local carpenters and artisans, I propose to the National Assembly to impose an excise duty on imported furniture at a rate of 30% of the customs value, excluding furniture originating from East African community countries. Mr. Speaker, Kenya has sufficient local capacity to produce paint, varnishes, and lacquers. However, proliferation of cheap imports has reduced competitiveness of locally produced paints, varnishes, and even all the other products associated. To protect the local paint manufacturers, I propose to the National Assembly to introduce excise duty at the rate of 15% of the excisable value of imported paints, varnishes, and similar products. I now turn to amendments to the Income Tax Act. Mr. Speaker, let me highlight the proposed changes under the Income Tax Act. The current interest deduction restriction based on earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization was introduced in 2021 to discourage tax planning. This restriction currently applies to both local and foreign financial institutions. Mr. Speaker, I have received proposals from taxpayers who borrow loans from local financial institutions indicating that the restrictions discourages their access to credit. To address this concern, I propose to the National Assembly to exclude interest on loans borrowed from local financial institutions from interest deduction restriction. In addition, Mr. Speaker, where interest on loans borrowed from non-resident is disallowed, I propose to the National Assembly to allow businesses to carry forward that interest for deduction in the next 5 years, subsequent years. This will align to the international best practice. Mr. Speaker, in 2016, the government introduced simplified tax regimes, the tax regime that requires landlord to pay tax on residential rental income at the rate of 10% per month. In order to enlarge compliance and encourage more landlords to pay tax under this regime, I propose to the National Assembly to reduce the tax rate for this regime from 10% to 7.5% per month. Mr. Speaker, in order to support startup companies, I propose to the National Assembly to amend the Income Tax Act to defer the taxation of gains on shares offered to employees in lieu of their salaries in a startup company for 5 years, all till the date employment ceases, or till the date of sale of the shares, whichever comes earlier. Mr. Speaker, upon retirement, most senior citizens have no access to medical cover and spend their literal savings on healthcare services. In order to encourage employees save for their post-retirement needs, I propose to the National Assembly to provide tax relief of 15% of the contributions to a post-retirement medical fund, or Kenya shillings 5,000 per month, whichever is lower. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I propose to the National Assembly to exempt from income tax the investment income earned by post-retirement medical fund. This will reduce the pressure on the government expenditure on the medical care and accord the retirees access to dignified health care. Mr. Speaker, we have noted that family members have been using exemption from capital gains tax on transfer of property between related persons as an avenue to reduce their tax liability. In order to remedy the situation, I propose to the National Assembly to change the base of capital gains tax from the sale of property to be the original cost before the transfer to the family member in instances where a property is transferred to a third party within a period of less than 5 years. Mr. Speaker, despite the advantages brought about by the digital platform, the transactions usually conducted under the platforms are not in the tax net. I propose to the National Assembly to introduce a digital asset tax at a rate of 3% on the value of the digital asset transferred or exchanged. Mr. Speaker, to further create equity and fairness, I propose to the National Assembly to introduce withholding tax at the rate of 5% of the gross payment in respect of digital content monetization. This will apply to incomes generated through media and digital platforms. Mr. Chairman, currently, non-residents pay withholding tax on payments in respect to sales, promotion, marketing, and advertising services. In order to harmonize taxation treatment for residents and non-resident and ensure equity, I propose to the National Assembly to introduce withholding tax on the same services to residents at the same rate of 5% of gross amount. Mr. Speaker, resident companies currently pay 30% of corporate tax, while non-resident with permanent establishment pay 37.5% of their gains on profit. This creates an impression that Kenya discriminates between residents and non-residents. In order to harmonize taxation treatment for residents and non-resident companies, I propose to the National Assembly to reduce the corporate tax rate for non-residents from 37.5% to 30%. Further, in order to ensure that there is level playing field, I propose to the National Assembly to introduce tax on repatriated profits at a rate of 15%, which is equal to the rate charged on dividends paid to non-residents. Mr. Speaker, businesses deduct diminution value of implements, utensils, or even similar articles used in the production process over a period of 3 years in determination of the taxable profits. But in order to increase working capital for the businesses, I propose to the National Assembly to amend the Income Tax Act to provide 100% investment deduction of the value of these items in the first year of use. Mr. Speaker, in 2020, the government implemented various measures to cushion businesses from adverse effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. This included providing tax incentives during the period. With easing of the COVID-19 pandemic and recovery of businesses, I propose to the National Assembly to lower the upper thresholds for turnover tax from 50 million to 25 million and retain the lower threshold of Kenya shillings 1 million. In addition, I propose to the National Assembly that the turnover tax rate for this sector to be at 3%. Mr. Speaker, last year, the government provided various tax incentives to promote local manufacturing of human vaccines. That was applied in order to further support these manufacturers. So in order to continue supporting these manufacturers, I propose to the National Assembly to exempt the manufacturers in this sector from withholding tax on interest and royalties paid to non-residents. Mr. Speaker, the current PAYE tax structure has 3 rates and bands applicable to 3.3 million employees. The bands are as follows. 10% is applied to income tax, to income up to 24,000 per month. 25% is applied to the next 8,333 per month, and while 30% is applied to incomes above 32,333 per month. Mr. Speaker, employees who fall under the first category, who constitute about 42.5% of the total employed workforce and who earn a maximum of 24,000 per month, don't pay any tax to government, as the tax computed from this income is equal to the relief of 2,400 per month under the Act. The second category of employees, who constitute about 37.2% of the total working population and earn incomes between 24,000 per month to 32,333 per month, pay a tax rate of 25%. The third category of employees, that form 20.4% of the total employees, earn incomes above 32,333 per month and pay a tax at the highest rate of 30%. The tax structure for the PAYE, Mr. Speaker, means that the tax burden falls on 57% of the total employed workforce. The tax structure is therefore regressive, and as an individual employee earning income above 32,333 per month falls within the upper band at the rate of 30%, leaving no significant gap between employees who do not pay tax as a result of tax relief and those earning higher incomes. In this respect, we have to embark on the review of this taxation structure to make the tax bands more progressive, sharing the tax burden more uniformly across income groups. Mr. Speaker, at the start of this journey, I propose to the National Assembly to introduce 2 additional tax bands. A 4th band will be applicable to employees earning incomes between 500,000 per month to Kenya shillings 800,000 per month at the rate of 32.5%. And a 5th band that will be applicable to employees earning incomes above 800,000 per month at the rate of 35%. As a result of this change, the employees who will pay tax at 30% will be 19.5%, while those 2 new tax bands will affect 26.67% of employees. And the last band will constitute, let me repeat that. As a result of this change, the employees who will pay 30% tax will be 19% of the total, while the 2 tax bands will affect 26,676 employees, who constitute about 0.8% of total employed workers in the country. Mr. Speaker, We shall continue to review the pay structure to make it as progressive as possible and redistribute the burden of tax incidents. Measures to enhance tax administration. Amendments to the Tax Procedure Act 2015. Mr. Speaker, currently, Kenya Revenue Authority has no visibility on the transactions of trusts, largely due to lack of requirement to report to KRA by trustees. This makes it difficult to ascertain the tax payable on the incomes paid to the beneficiaries of trusts. In this regard, I propose to the National Assembly to amend the Tax Procedures Act to require all trustees administering trusts in Kenya to maintain and avail records required by the Kenya Revenue Authority. Mr. Speaker, in order to enhance the tax compliance by use of technology, I propose to the National Assembly to amend the Tax Procedures Act to require taxpayers to issue electronically generated tax invoices, which can be tracked and traced through an electronic tax invoice management system, the e-TIMS. Mr. Speaker, in order to streamline the tax administration and remove pressure to abandon taxes and grant waivers of tax, I propose to the National Assembly to amend Tax Procedures Act to remove powers to abandon tax, as well as waivers on penalties and interest that currently exist in the Act. Mr. Speaker, to encourage taxpayers to pay outstanding tax debts, I propose to the National Assembly to introduce a one-year tax amnesty on penalties and interest on the accrued tax debts up to 31st December 2022. In order to benefit from this amnesty, taxpayers will be expected to clear principal taxes between 1st September 2023 to 30th June 2024. And now I take this opportunity to urge all taxpayers to take advantage of the one-year amnesty to clean their tax ledgers by paying all tax arrears. Mr. Speaker, in order to enhance the power of the Commissioner General to correct taxes from non-compliant taxpayers using agency notices, I propose to the National Assembly to amend Tax Procedures Act to expand the scope of agency notices to cover default in payment of installment taxes, installment taxes, and in situations where taxpayers has made self-assessment and submitted tax returns but has failed to pay the taxes on due date. Mr. Speaker, submission of manual tax information to the Commissioner General poses administrative challenges and delays the decision making. I therefore propose to the National Assembly to amend the Tax Procedures Act to require the Commissioner General to provide a data management and reporting system that will allow taxpayers to electronically submit standardized transactional data on real-time basis. Mr. Speaker, impersonation of the Kenya Revenue Authority officers is an offense under the Penal Code and poses revenue risks. We have witnessed increased cases of impersonation of Kenya Revenue Authority officers. In order to curb this vice, I propose to the National Assembly to amend the Tax Procedures Act to provide for offenses and sanctions relating to impersonation of Kenya Revenue Authority officers. Mr. Speaker, in order to enhance the efficiency in administration of tax refunds and boost cash flow of businesses, I propose to the National Assembly to amend the Tax Procedures Act to allow taxpayers who overpay taxes to utilize overpaid tax to offset both outstanding tax debt and future tax liabilities. In addition, I propose to the National Assembly to amend the Tax Procedures Act to provide an additional 30 days for the determination of complex tax cases. This will provide more time for the Commissioner General to complete audit and investigate processes for complex tax refunds cases. Further, Mr. Speaker, I propose to the National Assembly to amend Tax Procedures Act to require Kenya Tax Authority, Kenya Revenue Authority to pay approved refunds within 6 months. In instances where approved refunds are not paid within this period, I propose to the National Assembly to further amend the Tax Procedures Act to provide for automatic offset of the approved refunds against outstanding tax liabilities in other tax heads or even future tax liabilities. Let me turn to amendments to the miscellaneous fees and levies 2016. Mr. Speaker, let me turn to the proposed amendments to miscellaneous fees and levies. I had earlier stated that the government is committed to lower cost of liquefied petroleum gas, LPG. In addition to removal of VAT on LPG, I propose to the National Assembly to remove import declaration fees, IDF, and railway development levy on LPG. Mr. Speaker, the Kenya Defence Forces and the National Police Service are exempted from import declaration fees and railway development levy in respect to equipment, machinery, motor vehicles for their official use. However, this does not extend to other goods for official use, such as material supplies. In this regard, I propose to the National Assembly to extend the exemption to all goods purchased or imported for official use by the Kenya Defence Forces and the National Police Service. Mr. Speaker, the aviation sector is critical in supporting tourism and transportation of passengers and cargo. Currently, some aircrafts and parts of the aircraft are exempt from import declaration fees, IDF, and railway development levy, RDL. To further support this industry, I propose to the National Assembly to extend the exemption to cover all aircraft, helicopters, aircraft engines, and aircraft spare parts. Mr. Speaker, currently the imported goods are subject to import declaration fee at the rate of 3.5% and railway development levy at the rate of 2%. On the other hand, raw materials and inputs imported by registered manufacturers are subject to a lower rate of 1.5% for both import declaration fee and railway development levy. These differentiated rates pose administrative challenges and are avenues for revenue loss. In order to address these challenges, I propose to the National Assembly to harmonize these rates at 2.5% for import declaration fee and 1.5% for railway development levy applicable to all goods imported into the country. I now turn to amendments on Betting, Gaming, and Lotteries Act Cap 131. Mr. Speaker, currently, the Kenya Revenue Authority has not been able to enforce tax correction from betting, gaming, prize competition, and lotteries activities due to lack of an enforcement provision in the Betting, Gaming, and Lotteries Act. In this regard, I propose to the National Assembly to amend this act to allow KRA to apply the provisions of Tax Procedures Act in enforcing tax correction. Let me now turn to amendments to the Employment Act. Mr. Speaker, in order to provide funds for the development of affordable housing and associated social and physical infrastructure, as well as the provision of affordable home financing strategy, I propose to the National Assembly to introduce an affordable housing levy through an amendment of the Employment Act 2007 to provide a monthly levy payable by the employer and the employee at 1.5% per month for an employee's gross monthly salary. Mr. Speaker, given that the construction industry is labor intensive, we expect every housing unit constructed will create new jobs, both direct and indirect, among the professionals, youth, MSMEs in general, along the production value chain of affordable housing. In order to support enterprises and businesses operating in the special economic zone, Mr. Speaker, through government support, the special economic zone and export processing zone continue to position our manufacturing sector at a pace as pace setters in the region through exports and manufactured goods. Presently, Mr. Speaker, the goods sold from these zones to the domestic market are subjected to import duty and other applicable taxes similar to goods imported from outside the East African Community region. This taxation does not differentiate whether the inputs or raw materials used to produce such goods originate from the customs territory or from outside the customs territory. In order to enhance the market access, I propose to the National Assembly to amend the Export Processing Zone Act and the Special Economic Zone Act to exempt from import duty goods produced from the Special Economic Zone and Export Processing Zone that use inputs or raw materials originating from the customs territory when sold into the domestic market. This will encourage enterprises operating in the zones to purchase raw materials or even inputs from the domestic market. Mr. Chairman, in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, it is clear that Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, it is clear that we face many socio-economic challenges. The global economy may take a long time before output gap is crossed, and the cost of living may take a long time to be felt. To address these challenges, the government has initiated policy, legal, and institutional reforms to address these issues. His Excellency the President has already led the way. Under his leadership, we have already laid a firm foundation for the bottom-up economic transformation agenda. The policies spelled out in this budget builds on a momentum for the envisaged transformation that will lead to improved livelihoods for all Kenyans. I therefore urge Kenyans to join hands in making this transformation journey a reality. Thankfully, our country is endowed with the necessary resources and human capital to confront the contemporary economic and social challenges and create a momentum for not only a higher and sustainable but also inclusive growth trajectory, but also create decent jobs, reduce poverty significantly. Mr. Speaker, this budget underpins the country's resolve and commitment to fulfill its social contract to Kenyans by progressively improving their welfare. At this point, Mr. Speaker, allow me to express my sincere gratitude to His Excellency the President, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, the President of the Republic of Kenya, and the Commander-in-Chief of Defense Forces, and His Excellency the Deputy President, His Honorable Mr. Rigathi Gachagua, for their counsel, guidance, and support during the entire process of laying foundation for the bottom-up economic transformation agenda and finalizing this budget. I also want to thank Her Excellency Madam Rachel Ruto, the First Lady of the Republic of Kenya, and Her Excellency Pastor Dorcas Gachagua, the Second Lady of the Republic of Kenya, for their support and contribution to the implementation of government initiatives, especially on the environment and climate change action, financial inclusion, and women empowerment. My special appreciation goes to the Prime Cabinet Secretary, the Attorney General, and my fellow Cabinet Secretaries their respective Principal Secretaries and accounting officers and staff in the government, ministries, departments, and agencies for their support and contribution in making contributions to this budget. I also extend my gratitude to the chairman of the Presidential Council of Economic Advisors, Dr. David Day, and all economic advisors at the council for their critical inputs and guidance in supporting the bottom-up economic transformation agenda. This is one team that used their diverse frontier knowledge and worked closely in developing the Kenya Kwanza Administrative Manifesto, the PRAN, in the run-up to the 2022 general election. We have produced and pulled most of the materials for this policy outcome from the PRAN. And that guidance has been very, very critical. And so, more specifically, I gained a lot of support from my colleague and friend, Dr. Kamau Dhuge, Senior Advisor and Head of Fiscal Affairs and Budget Policy at the Executive Office of the President, and currently he's the Governor Designate for the Central Bank of Kenya. Wish him and pass his congratulations. My sincere appreciations first to the Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly and your counterpart in Senate, the majority and minority leaders, and the entire House leadership, including the respective class for the National Assembly, for the approval process and the budget estimates for the financial year 2023 and related documents. Second, to honorable chairs and members of both the Budget and Appropriation Committee, Finance and National Planning Committee, and all departmental committees in this House that help me in terms of, and help us and my team to finalize the budget propositions. Third, I recognize and appreciate the management and staff of the National Treasury and Economic Planning who have worked tirelessly for long hours, including weekends, to ensure that this budget and supporting documents meet the legal guideline. Fourth, the Kenya Revenue Authority, Central Bank of Kenya, the Attorney General's Office, Commissioner of Revenue Allocations, Financial Sector Regulations, and various agencies under the National Treasury and Economic Planning. They have made contributions, and we appreciate their contribution. Fifth, my gratitude goes to the multilateral and bilateral development partners for their continued technical and financial support. Further, I thank the private sector for the sustained contribution to the growth of our economy and even contributions to the debate in terms of the tax measures and policies. Sixth, I wish to appreciate the media and the non-state actors for their active engagement and participation in this financial year and even in the process of budget process making. Mr. Speaker, I remain immensely grateful to my family for their support and inspiration as I execute my duties as the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury and Economic Planning since the appointment. And finally, Mr. Speaker, my utmost gratitude goes to all Kenyans for their contributions, proposals, and suggestions we received during the finalization of the budget. We have covered acres and acres of materials that provided propositions coming from Kenyans, and we are happy that what we have provided is a synthesis and balance of what they presented. Mr. Speaker, before I resume my seat, you will recall that I have already submitted to this House the budget estimates and the Finance Bill 2023, together with accompanying documents as required by the Public Finance Management. Today, I further submit the following documents to the August House and request that you graciously receive them. First, the budget policy statement for financial year 2023-24 was presented. The 2023 budget policy statement, estimates of revenue, grants and loans, financial statements for 2023-24 budget, medium-term debt management strategy, budget highlights for Mwananchi Guide for the financial year 2023-24, statistical annex for the budget statement for the 2023-24 financial year. So I do present the remaining documents to you, Mr. Speaker, sir, before I assume my position. Thank you, Your Honorable Speaker. I now take my seat.
Order, honorable members. Honorable members, I wish to thank the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury for ably making a public pronouncement of the budget policy highlights of the national government for the financial year 2023-24 and the medium term and the revenue raising measures. It took 3 hours and 20 minutes to be exact. In this regard, honorable members, I confirm that in conformity with the provisions of sections 39 and 39A of the Public Finance Management Act 2012 and Standing Order 244C, the Cabinet Secretary has already submitted to the National Assembly the relevant legislative proposals necessary to actualize the revenue-raising measures to finance the 2023-2024 budget. This has since culminated in the Finance Bill 2023, which is under consideration by this House. Honorable members, it's now my pleasure to invite all honorable members, the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury, the Prime Cabinet Secretary, other Cabinet Secretaries, and all invited guests to a reception at the Parliament courtyard hereinafter. Honorable members, now you may be upstanding. The House now stands adjourned until Tuesday, 20th June 2023 at 2:30 p.m.
Well, that is the conclusion of the pronouncement of the budget highlights and revenue raising measures for the national government for the financial year 2023-2024, presented by the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury and Economic Planning at the National Assembly chambers. Right now, members are walking out of the chambers after the Speaker directed that the House stands adjourned until next week, Tuesday, in the afternoon sitting. The Cabinet Secretary touching on a number of issues in the budget highlights and revenue-raising measures that will help the government achieve its bottom-up transformation.